I'm Ersin Han Ersin from Marshmallow Laser Feast. I'm an artist and a director, Marshmallow Laser Feast is a London-based experiential studio working in the intersection of art, science, and technology, and that liminal space kind of giving us different inspirations for various different projects. I'll show you what we've been doing before and where we are coming from. But primarily, I will show you the projects that I hold most dear, and I feel like those are the things I just want to do the rest of my life. So I'm going to start with the video, which you can see a broad range of projects, from robotics to screen-based media, from large stage shows to commercials. Lasers, obviously, we love lasers, as you can see, and light installations. Some of those works coming from primarily a collaborative process. So in our DNA, there's this collaborative process of kind of bringing different professions together to execute seemingly impossible projects. As you can see, some light, more projection. This is hacking FBI. Yeah. And finally, virtual reality. We paid him. He comes to every show. He's my partner's dad. So sometimes few frames actually can describe far better than the whole video. Basically what we do is blurring the boundaries between physical and digital, as you can see. So this is me without the beard. We've got two horses. One horse is running for commercial projects. The other horse is running for commissions, self-initiated projects. In reality, the commercial horse is far larger. The other one is a bit of a pony. And we are trying to make money from commercial projects and kind of invest and create self-initiated projects with them. So speaking of horses, I really like this image, the painting from 1821. As you can see, horses are galloping, 4 legs in the air, really dramatized scene. The interesting thing about this painting is, by this time, by 1821, we've been living with horses for 5,500 years. And if you think about Chauvet and Lascaux, the case where we painted the first horses, which was 42,000 years ago. So we've been seeing and living with horses for thousands of years and still thinking that they are running like that. Till Muybridge invented the chronophotography, which allowed us to see how actually they are running. As you can see, they never, open their legs like that. So this is my analogy to technology, because we utilize technology quite heavily in every project we do. But we see that technology as a tool, as a lens, which allows us to see something that's been there, but wasn't kind of available to us. And if we think technology, what technology is, I mean, cooking, is technology. When it was first kind of invented, or when we domesticated fire for the first time, it was incredible technology. Alphabet is a technology. So technology, over time, with the use, becomes invisible. It becomes nature. It becomes second nature. This is a diagram from Kurt von Mansworth. And when I look at it, it's really interesting. But when we look at this diagram with the idea of virtual reality and augmented reality, things slightly change. So how many of you tried virtual reality before? Loads. And augmented reality? like Pokemon Go or through your phone or a headset? Great, loads. And how many of you think within a decade you'll be living in an augmented reality world and you'll be conducting your day-to-day life with an augmented reality layer? 1, 4, 8, 9 people? Right. So the ambition around augmented reality is actually kind of quadrupling the current projection of virtual reality for future. So spatial computing will take place in our lives quite substantially, like smartphones do today, and we will be living in those worlds. So, I mean, you know, this is kind of stating the obvious. It will happen one way or another, maybe not a decade, but 12 years. But the interesting thing is, I'm going to start with bad news and then show you some really nice stuff. This is a little paragraph from the ethics, the code of conduct for virtual reality by Michael Madry and Thomas Metzinger. What it says is, the global control of experiential content introduces opportunities for new forms of both mental and behavioral manipulation. That's true, because when you put a virtual reality headset, within a minute, the system can actually extract enough information to identify your political inclination, your sexual orientation, potentially where you're coming from, and your gender. And this is incredible when you think about how little data it requires to understand. And in the age of surveillance capitalism, this is an incredible opportunity. And when you think about Google and Facebook are the major 2 players in virtual reality and augmented reality world, that is fucking scary. So, and, you know, especially when commercial, political, or governmental interests are behind the creation and maintenance of the virtual reality. I live in London, we have Brexit, and those 3 million votes that gave us Brexit coming from somewhere around the ballpark of Facebook, you know, false advertising. So we have to be really careful about this. It's not just another technology, another medium, but it is a platform that is relatively dangerous. So I'm not going to talk about this too much. I just want to leave it there for you to think, because us as the consumers of the culture, consumers of the content, we have power to demand what we want to see and what we want to show. So I'll be showing some of those kind of orchestrated sensory experiences through some of the projects that we've been doing for the last 4 years. Obviously, orchestrated sensory experiences, you know, go far back. And these are the kind of curated ones when we think about indigenous people in Amazonian rainforest utilizing psychedelics, plants, and plant intelligence to actually offer a parallel reality to engage with nature in different ways. This goes, you know, far back. But this is more of a constructed way. George Hale, he's a hero, like 1906, crazy man, putting a camera in front of a train, and then kind of filming all the landscapes, and then coming back to New York, which is what you are seeing on the top, and playing that video back into a train car-like room. And his man was shaking the room based on the landscape, and they were spraying the scent from the landscape, and they were charging 5 pence. They did lots of shows, around 500, but the content was same, so they didn't have enough network, and so they couldn't actually maintain a model. But that was the time that they were trying. For us, we've been doing immersive pieces for quite some time in different forms. And in 2014, Oculus Rift came out, offered a virtual reality headset to World, which was $400. And the generation before, the virtual reality headsets around $10,000. So that opened up the floodgates of this new medium. By that time, we were commissioned to do a piece at Grisdale Forest by Abandoned Normal Devices. It's a festival that takes place in weird places every other year. And they asked us to do something in the forest. We were like, okay, went there, and then realized, actually, we know nothing about nature. So I've got a pop quiz. How many of you cannot name those logos? How many of you can name all the leaves here? 4, 8. Nice, 9. Excellent, great. Let's have a beer after. What about this? I mean, this is kind of normal, right? An average human can name 430 logos by the look of it, by the shape of it. And we are yet to name 5 plants and trees. And that's okay, because when you go to a supermarket, you should be able to differentiate cooking oil from detergent. And this is a basic survival skill. But I mean, there is a crazy disconnect, and this was the epiphany of going to that forest to do a recce, to realize what we're going to do, and then realizing that I personally know nothing about nature. And this question emerged. It sounds like oxymoron. Can we reconnect with nature through virtual reality? I mean, go to a forest, hug a tree, that's okay. But it's not actually. For the very same reason, 430 logos and 5 plants, very same reason, we won't do that. So how can we utilize this emerging field and the new technology to shake the snow globe? Because our day-to-day lives making us numb to certain things. We are getting used to those things. And how do we use and leverage a new medium to do that? But it's a medium, it's crazy, because me as an artist, producing a piece of content, I'm not even asking too much. I'm telling you that it's in a VR headset. You are voluntarily giving your eyeballs, your ears, sometimes your skin, and if you are tasting something through that, all your senses voluntarily. I mean, in the age of this attention economy, I'm sitting in a really luxurious position. So how do we utilize that luxurious position? Through that research, we stumble upon this term called Umwelt by Jacob von Uexküll. It's really interesting. He single-handedly shaped the kind of root of biology and what we understand from biology. Basically, what it means is self-centered worldview. So if you think about a mosquito and yourself, the mosquito lives in 9 to 15 frames per second. We live around 24 to 30 frames per second. So their time perception, although we share the same space, is completely different than ours. What this offers is, actually every specimen is receiving and perceiving a different type of reality based on their sensory features. And that was the idea. So we went there, we used this LiDAR scanner. It's an architectural tool which allows you to capture volumetric information with incredibly high detail, super high fidelity, down to sub-millimeter accuracy, and then translated that data to the perception of some of the animals. So we built this really simple narrative. It's the food chain, basically. You start as a midge, a mosquito. You get eaten by a dragonfly. That gets eaten by a frog. That gets eaten by an owl. And we ran out of money there. So we have to stop and, make a decision. But it's fascinating because through the process, we were working with Salford University and Natural History Museum in London to understand the sensory features of those species. A mosquito, that stupid, annoying thing, has an incredible superpower that you would never guess. They can sense CO2, so they see carbon dioxide. So if you're wondering how they are finding you in dark while you are sleeping, this is how they are finding. So if you don't breathe in the evenings, they can't come and find you. I mean, try it, seriously. So what is it like to be a mosquito and perceive the world through the eyes of mosquito? Because there's so much carbon dioxide and oxygen constantly flowing around the forest. And this is, how would they see it? This is kind of a speculative, a modified lens that allows you to see carbon dioxide in that world. Probably we would be a little more, careful about the carbon emission we have. But then, we went this place, scanned it, and then translated that data into a world where you can still understand some of the nuances in the space and the information coming from the trees, but also you see this invisible layer. Basically, we were allowing you to do or see a world beyond the limits of your senses and making that kind of invisible world visible to us. But, you are flying as a mosquito happily, seeing carbon dioxide. You get eaten by a dragonfly. Dragonflies are the best. I'm not joking, seriously. So they're so bonkers that they see 300 frames per second. Think about it. Your iPhone camera is 240 frames per second, and they see 360 degrees. I mean, this compound eyes in that tiny brain processing information at this incredible speed. It's bonkers. And they see full spectrum of light. They see infrared, they see blue rays, gamma rays, X-rays, everything. And their wingspan was around 2 meters, just 2.5 million years ago. They are the most accomplished flyers ever existed. They can fly in any direction and change their direction in the way that they like by taking their head as a pivot point. Really scary, like think about having a few of those around today. Luckily they shrunk. So what you're seeing on the left is something called Dragonfly Cinema. This is how they figured out how many frames they see and what kind of light spectrum they can look at. So we took that information and then translated it into this look. Same data, you are seeing highly saturated world where all the prey, mosquitoes, are flying and really pronounced in this world. And combining this with some of the multisensory aspects, such as letting you wear a sub-pack, which is a rumble pack. It vibrates, and it's giving you the feeling of wings. So you are this accomplished flyer flying around, and you get eaten by virtually blind frogs. I mean, it's really not fair, but that's life. They are bonkers. The one on the left, Tungara frog, they can echolocate pairs through riveting. So they rivet, they send that wave out, it bounces off things, come back, and they sense and feel through their body again, which is fascinating. And the other ones, this is the funny bit, funny and fascinating because when we think about consciousness and how we perceive reality, we often think about our body and our organs are kind of autopilot, sending all messages, sensory messages to our brain. Our brain is parsing that information to create what we call reality. With one exception, frog's eye don't see any vertical movement. They only see horizontal movement because they are hardwired to see worms rather than other insects. So that evolutionary advantage allowed them to exist in such large populations, but also reminds us something that we might have organs with intelligence, which is fascinating. So this is an important point, which they found it in the 40s, and today still a huge debate about perception, consciousness, and how intelligence distributed. So this is the sub-pack. I mentioned the rumble pack that you're wearing, and it's vibrating, so you can actually breathe in and out and rivet, and you feel through your entire body. And you see the world quite dark, but the riveting allows you to see more of the environment. And when you move your head left and right, so in a horizontal axis, it allows you to see the flying insects, the dragonflies more pronounced. Those yellow things are there. So you're sitting in a puddle, making lots of ripples, and just really loud. Obviously, you are an open target to this incredible feature, an owl. Owl, just another crazy specimen. These are these eyeballs. It's kind of an egg shape. The conical eyeballs allowing them to have a binocular vision. What that means is they can read newspaper from the other side of a football pitch. So it's like 100 meters. They definitely read Guardian. They never read The Sun. But it's fascinating because they are sitting there watching that stupid frog to puddle around. They fly in. They finesse their flight so well that they fly almost silently, and then they grab them. And then you become an owl. But the funny thing is, this is our assumption, obviously. Scientists looking at the human eyeball and then extrapolating the information and assuming that the peripheral vision of the owls are quite obstructed because of the shape, but the central vision is really sharp. So, whoa. Let's see what's going on here. Okay. So wherever you look, your central vision is dramatized and kind of coming to a focus, and the peripheral vision is always obstructed. And this is how you fly around, grab things. So, it's a speculative piece. It's not a data visualization. By no means it's a scientific experiment, but it's more like trying to understand another specimen in a better way, in an emotional way. So building that emotional connection to something that you don't care, like mosquito. So that was kind of the turning point, because I probably personally learned through this process than my entire biology education, high school and before. So that kind of set the path for us. But obviously, it didn't stop there. We were exhibiting in a forest, so we had to protect those headsets and come up with a solution that is aesthetic enough to do the job. But obviously, there's other reasons. This is real website. Check this out. It's full of those. I mean, when you watch people outside, people in VR, they look really stupid. So how do we make it a little less stupid, a little more animated, and somehow transforming you as an audience member into that scene, and giving you some clues about what's going on in the headset? So we start experimenting with the MOS, and then build those headsets. The interesting thing was, In the Eyes of the Animal went into world tour. It's been to 60-odd festivals and biennials so far. And each time, this is real moss, by the way, it started from Grisdale Forest and start falling off. So you patch from another forest that you're exhibiting or in another gallery. So we have this like Frankenstein forest living on top of the helmet. In the beginning, it was smelling really nice. Now it's a bit like stinker. But as an idea, you are going around with kind of a microbiome. Obviously, Americans don't like that, so we had to smuggle the plants into the country. And some countries are a bit funny when it comes to living plants. So in the process of In the Eyes of the Animal, one thing we figured that trees are alive. I mean, surprise. But the fascinating thing is, some of them can live up to 6,000, 7,000 years. Like, how this is even possible? We are, we can't make plans for 4 years. Look at all the politics. I mean, it's rubbish. And yet alone understanding the Anthropocene and our impact on this planet. And the biggest problem is we are really shit at long-term plans. So how do you make long-term plans if you don't even understand the concept? And then we start looking into trees, because there are those incredible creatures. They are chemists, making those little chemical compounds for every attack, everything, and translating that into life. They are eating sunlight, combining that with carbon dioxide, releasing oxygen into the atmosphere, taking that carbon and producing themselves, growing into size like 120-meter sequoia tree, which was the next project that we took as the hero. And then this question arises: can we dial into tree time and understand trees a little better, and maybe follow the journey of a single drop of water being sucked by the roots, pump up to the canopy, and then transport outside to the atmosphere again? I mean, the same process of In the Eyes of the Animal applied to here, which you can see, tiny humans next to those ones. And we scanned the trees. It was a challenge, because sequoia trees are the largest living single organisms ever existed. They are larger than dinosaurs, larger than anything else. And the oldest one to date is 3,400 years old. 3,400 years old. Like, think about it. Our calendar is 2019, just going all the way back, and they've been standing there while we were, learning history, and it was there, witnessing every single thing. It's quite fascinating when I think about the scale of it and the time that they live. And then we built this project called Tree Hugger in 2016. As you can see, it's similar aesthetic, but this time we worked with the Berkeley Natural Science to understand the inner workings of sequoia trees. One fascinating thing about sequoia trees, and most of the trees are incredible when it comes to sucking water from roots to the canopy. But there is something called gravity barrier, or atmospheric pressure stops pipe systems to work any more than 10 meters on the ground level. but they somehow manage to suck water up to 100, 120 meters. And they have this magical power and incredible, structure to do that. And so we wanted to just focus on that. So you follow the water's journey from roots to the canopy and build some form of muscle memory. And the idea is not, taking people away from nature, but it's more about what happens when you take the headset off. What happens when you go to a park after that, next time? Do you start seeing all those inner workings and the magical inner workings of a tree? That was kind of the aim. The simulated part was important because we were trying to be, true to science, but equally, it takes 20 days, one drop of water from roots to the canopy in a grown-up sequoia. So we had to sped this time up. So we were kind of dialing into tree time while also kind of removing and reducing the tree time into our time. But also, one other thing emerged from the exploring the tactility. In the eyes of the animal, the installation was placed 15 minutes far from the car park in the forest. This is the exact length of time that you can spend in a forest to reduce your blood pressure and balance your heart rate. And it's called forest bathing. Try it, just 15 minutes. It's going to make you feel much better. And if you do it every day, you're probably going to live a little longer. So in the same way, here, how do we actually make people engage with the piece beyond the audio and visual components? And this came through the tactility. So we build something that they can actually hug, as the name suggests. And it was inspired by the shape of the tree. This is like lots of layers of sponge there. And ended up something like that. So you can actually hug and put your head inside of the tree, see a world beyond the limits of your senses, and see all the inner workings and travel up to the canopy. It took different forms that we exhibited, kind of networked two of those pieces. So trying to kind of create a body of work that we can actually put all of them together one by one. And this fascinating fact kind of came out of this book. By the way, I'd strongly recommend Peter Wolhoven's Hidden Life of Trees. It's an incredible source. It's about the mycelium, the wood wide web, that connects all the trees and plants to each other, and how they live, how they nurture, how they form families. And then this fact emerged. Because they are chemists, obviously they are communicating not through just the network of this incredible network under the soil, but also producing chemical compounds, which we can call them scents, and sending them around to share some of the messages. Bonkers, eh? The way we wanted to engage with that was kind of building a little device, working with a startup from California called Sensible Tech, which allows you to deploy scents down to frame accurate, timing, and create a scent timeline almost. And obviously, coming from this audiovisual background, you have a storyboard and then you match the audio with it, or you have the audio and then you match the visuals with it. Here, it doesn't work like that. Perception is completely different person to person, and we still don't know parts of how we actually perceive scent. So it was kind of an interesting process of learning how cognitive process of scent and kind of analyzing and understanding scent working for humans. It's still challenging. Some of the scents have smaller particles, which we can call them notes. And some scents come together to form a single scent, but it has 6, 7 different notes. And some people's nostrils or their receptors are slightly bigger or smaller. So some people take some scents earlier than the others. So how do you normalize in a world where nothing is actually fixed? We don't have an answer, still exploring this field, but it's fascinating because learning that process was quite interesting. So I'd like to do a little bit of a breathing meditation, just like a minute and a half. So if you please close your eyes, watch your wallets, and breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Imagine every other breath you are taking coming from a tree around the corner or from the Amazon. Imagine every other breath is coming from an ocean, a piece of puddle, a green bacteria or algae, producing that for you. And by inhaling, you are taking nature in you. By exhaling, you are giving back, which then, those trees, taking it in, turning into matter and forming themselves. So, how was it? Good? Excellent. Anyone sleeping? Okay. It's magical. One breath, when you take it in, has 25 billion tiny molecules darting around faster than the speed of sound, and going into your lungs, and your bloodstream taking it in. And you are doing this 17,000 times a day. And if you imagine you are interacting with a tree almost half of this time, 8,500 times, touching a tree with your breath. And the other half is touching ocean, another creature. And when you think about that magical connection between us and nature, it's like, it's tearjerker. I mean, it's fascinating. It's the miracle of this, being alive and living. And this is from Dave Abraham, offering ourselves to the world at one moment and drawing the world into ourselves at the other. So when we were doing Treehugger, obviously the other big theme around the trees was the oxygen and carbon dioxide, and how we inhale what they produce, and how we exhale and they inhale. So we built a project called We Live in an Ocean of Air. It was inspired by this really simple, mechanical thing that we all learn by the age of 7, maybe 6, how it works and what happens there. But we wanted to create a collective experience rather than an individual experience. So 12 people embark on a journey, and while sharing a breath with each other, as well as they share a breath with the tree. So they exhale carbon dioxide, come out of their mouth that they can see. There are those tiny sensors we built, custom sensors on top of the headset, allows them to see their own breath. They go into trees and plants and trees produce oxygen and give back to them. And then there's a kind of dynamic simulation running there that you can actually play with your breath, which you just saw. And you can push it to the other one. So you can actually start interacting with other person next to you through breath. And how do you see each other in a world like this? How do we just strip everything back down to the most basic form? Through that research, some of those found images led us to a place where, when you look at some of the patterns that's emerging in nature and how connected we are to it, it's fascinating. It's mind-boggling. I mean, obviously, when you think about it as a high-level concept, we all know that. But when you actually think about it and start seeing some of those patterns, it emerges, and then you feel, that emotional tinkle again. So we build those avatars. You see each other in the form of blood circulation and carbon dioxide and oxygen. And there's a tiny heart rate monitor that's synchronizing your heartbeat with the avatar that you are in, that world, and stripping you down to that avatar. You can see. It's so funny. People do really funny things in VR, but it's kind of fun to watch. Whoa, that wasn't me. Maybe. The interesting thing is, working in the field of this new media art and taking place in some of those festivals, biennials, you have a particular kind of culture and content consumer audience. Whereas here, for the first time, we start to meeting really interesting range of people. I suppose because of the place that we were exhibiting, it was inside a gallery in London. It's one of those, West End galleries that gets 1.5 million people a year. And an exhibition was there for almost 6 months. The middle one is our oldest visitor, 92 years old. Her first VR experience. The one on the left, the couple, they are above 70s. They are holding hands and climbing that tree together. And the one on the right is a family, 3 generations there. They went together, they held hands, and they shared that breath. It was really interesting to see that if you gave the opportunity for multi-generational kind of messaging to work, they can actually take it. The other part that I'd like to mention, because we designed 4 different scents for that journey. What you smell in the bottom of the forest is different than what you smell on the top. And through that process again, we built, haptics and the scent machines and the wind, so you have full multisensory narrative. That's, our perception, our reality is not coming from just through eyes and ears, which we think they are the most important aspects, but actually, the reality, as we call it, is this intermingling, sensory perception that's coming from all around. But the interesting thing was, which one do you take as the lead? We couldn't decide on that. The current theory is building an emotional arc, one on the top left, where what do we want them to feel for that particular moment? And how can I achieve that? By showing, make them listening and smelling and then feeling at the same time. It's quite hypothetical. There are so many, resources out there, but everyone feels in a different way, and we don't have an exact explanation of how feelings can occur. There are really, strong theories, but that was the starting point. And quite interestingly, I started my journey as a designer. I studied visual communication design and then computational arts, and I'm now turning into, this interesting materials perception molder almost, sculpting perception through those mediums. Quite interesting learning curve, but obviously, when you're looking at the senses, this is the allegory of all senses, and 5 of them kind of represented there. And this is the Aristotelian way of looking at it. He said we have 5 senses, which is actually not accurate. We've got 25 to 33 different senses. Even just touch, we call it touch, has 6 different receptors that senses what kind of surfaces we are touching and activates accordingly. And they all connected to a different part of the brain, and they all send a different message. We have a perception of time, we have a perception of our heartbeat, we have a perception of which part of our organs looking up or down, and this whole world opens up in order to evoke certain sensations, to communicate more of those natural phenomena. How do we actually create more and interesting emotions, and how do we create those narratives? This is an interesting fact. People can remember more than 65% of what they smell. When it comes to visuals, this is 25%. So as, narrative builders, storytellers, experience makers, how do we utilize all multisensory aspects that are beyond the audio and visual stimuli? Those are some of them. You can take a photo of it, have a look. It's really interesting. What would it feel to, design something for chemoreceptors, for instance? Okay. And that brings me to the end of this. How do we conceive something so much smaller than us, like mycelium? Mycelium is this incredible thing, like 2-micron thick network connecting all the trees and plants to each other. And when we die, those are the ones that decompose our body. So we actually turn into mushroom and trees. And how do you, it depends on the choice of death, obviously. But if you watch this, this is one of the concept videos that we made. Carbon dioxide sucked by those tiny mouths called stomata on the leaf. They're all going inside. As the tree sprays water out, they take carbon dioxide, and they separate carbon dioxide into bits. So carbon goes in, and oxygen goes back, which is this incredible process, the photosynthesis. But then 70% of the carbon they take from the atmosphere gets stored under the soil. And it's not just through their roots, but then they have this incredible symbiotic relationship. It's like a stock market. They trade that carbon with mycelium, with other species, the ones that are not seeing the sunlight maybe as much, or needing more carbon, or other nutrients. A little bit gross, obviously, in microscopic level. There are those nematodes just pulling and pushing things and working under the soil, for a healthy ecosystem. Those mites are bizarre. But there is this incredible, magical process going under the soil pretty much every day and every moment that has been around for so long. Lichens, moss, and mushrooms are the colonizers of this planet. They allowed atmosphere to become what it is today. They allowed those trees to become whatever they are today. So it's really important to tell those stories, I think. And the next project we are doing is about mycelium. You die, you sink into the soil, you embody the mycelium. And then questions like this. Do dolphins dream in sonar? I mean, why not? It could be, right? Or what is it like to be a bat and feeling and seeing the world through the eyes, the receptors of a bat? The last one, I just want to finish on this note. Gustav Metzger's, this quote is really important. It resonates with me a lot. And I think we have that privilege to act on something. The art, architecture, and design world needs to take a stand against the ongoing erasure of species, even where there is a little chance of ultimate success. It is our privilege and our duty to be at the forefront of the struggle. There is no choice but to follow the path of ethics into aesthetics. Thank you very much.